Money is necessary for our security and for a good life.
And the corollary, the love of money is the root of all evil.
The American Religious Town Hall meeting is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here is your host and moderator.
Welcome, viewers. Thank you for joining us today in an interesting topic of what do we do with our money, good or bad? My name is Andrea Luxton. I am today's moderator, and I am the president of Andrews University in Michigan. I'd like you to meet our other panelists.
My name is Bishop Michael Olson, and I serve as the Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
I'm Tom Plumbley. I'm a minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I serve as the senior minister at First Christian Church, Fort Worth, Texas.
Hi, I'm Carl Trovall. I'm professor of ethics and history at Concordia University in Austin, Texas.
Thank you, panelists, and thank you for joining us today. And here is today's program. Guest columnist and evangelical pastor Shane Looper from Coldwater, Michigan, recently wrote, "Jesus suggests that money is not only deceitful, but is also bossy and unreliable." He starts his article by claiming that, quote, "some evangelists have been able to make big bucks, Learjet, extravagant estates, Rolex watches, etc., from peddling religion," end of quote. Jesus frequently spoke about money, but just like the contemporary televangelists, Jesus did so in vastly different ways. He instructed people to use money wisely, which included giving it to the poor. An important point that Looper made is that Jesus never said or implied that money is evil. Money is neutral, he says. Money is an instrument that can be used for good, giving to the poor, or evil, hoarding for oneself. Marcus Bohr has argued that what was evil at the time of Jesus was the domination system and the exploitation and the injustice that people experienced, both by the Roman authorities as well as the temple authorities. Jesus always stood on the side of the kingdom of God. The evil does not come from money per se, then, but from people's exploitation of, quote, "the alien, the orphan, the widow, and those who are needy." That's Jeremiah 7, verse 6. With all this in mind, the panel is asked to answer at least the following questions. Firstly, in America today, many people see prosperity and well-being as a sign of God's blessing. What would your religious tradition say about that? Secondly, when one looks at the rich ruler in Mark 10, 17 to 31, is Jesus telling this story as an example of wealth being an obstacle to faith? And thirdly, how do you balance the real financial needs of a house of worship with the authentic performance of its spiritual mission? I'm going to start by going back to those who began our program today for their comments.
This is an excellent topic, and I think it's very relevant for everybody. It's for those who are responsible for religious houses of worship, but also for people who live in their households, because I remember when I was a young priest, which is more years than I care to remember, that classmates of mine said, "Oh, I'm never going to talk about money. I'm never going to preach about money." And I think that's a naive form, because frankly, money affects morality and what we do with it, and so you're going to want to use this. And the reason that money affects morality is because in the beginning at creation, really God created everything for the common stewardship and use of everybody. Now, in order for that to be effectuated, given the diversity among people and places, private property is necessary, but ultimately it's always directed back to the common stewardship for everyone, so that the right to hold property is a basic human right, but it's got a correlative responsibility to be used well. In the same way, for businesses, businesses are made for profit, but in some ways there has to be an equitable share among the profits, and that's usually distributed by wages and by other benefits and things like that as well, for human flourishing. And the Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches, in his use of things, man should regard the external goods he legitimately owns not merely as exclusive to himself, but common to others also, in the sense that they can benefit others as well as himself. The ownership of any property makes its holder a steward of providence, with the task of making it fruitful and communicating its benefit to others, first of all his family. With that in mind, I think it's the responsibility of church leaders, especially those entrusted with the stewardship of pastoring a parish or pastoring a church, that everything that is collected is meant to go to the mission of the church and the expanse of the church, and there has to be transparency in that as well. It's important for us to remember that and to live that way. And so things like land speculation or other things that just simply to accrue for profit really is immoral from the standpoint of the apostolate of religion. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was that quote from the Catechism is pretty impressive. Gives me pause to think about the common good and all of our wealth being used for the common good. My comments, of course, were made in the context of the danger of idolatry in the monotheistic tradition of placing something higher than God, who is the giver of all gifts, including money. And so that's why money, people often misquote this from the New Testament, that money is the root of all evil. That's not true. The quote is, the love of money is the root of all evil. And I don't know whether it's the root of all evil, but it's certainly a great deal of it. Nevertheless, and so that was my point, is the danger of placing money over God and money over neighbor. And the question is, how do you know that you're in love with money or not? And I went to this pastor. This is what he says. I found this to be very interesting. The Shane Looper. He says, people in love desire to be with their love. They think about the object of their love. They make plans to be with their love. Such behaviors give a person away. He or she is in love with someone, or in the case of money, with something. What frustrates me more, an unexpected interruption that separates me from time spent with what frustrates me more as an individual? This is a personal question. An unexpected interruption that separates me from time spent with God in devotion or service, or an unexpected expense that separates me from my money? On one level, that's simplistic, but on another level, it's like that's probably a good heuristic to help us think about what the role of money is in our lives. And I think prosperity is certainly a sign of God's blessing, but there's no correlation that the more prosperous you are, the more God's blessing you. In fact, Jesus said, blessed are the poor. That's not where blessing is found primarily, is in wealth. And this Mark 10 tradition, I want to just touch on that very briefly, at least how I always interpreted that passage, is there's a young ruler who comes to Jesus and says, what do I have to do to be saved? And Jesus says, well, just obey all the commandments. And the young ruler says, well, I've done all that. And then Jesus says, oh, there is one other thing. Sell everything you have and give it to the poor. And of course, he walks away a very unhappy man. And of course, the command isn't for everyone to give away their wealth, because wealth is necessary for our own benefit. But the point here is First of all, the young man had the arrogance to believe that he obeys the commandments of God, which no one can obey perfectly. We're all in that struggle of becoming holier. But the second piece of that is that Jesus kind of hits on the specific idolatrous problem of that young rich ruler. And that was that he did love money more than anything, and hence he couldn't release even any of it for the benefit of the neighbor, which is, I think, the lesson for us. So,
Very good.
Go ahead, Tom.
Tom?
Well, you're talking about the things that you do for the things that you love. We sing about it too. We sing about money. You cannot watch TV these days without seeing the guy that says, "I'm going to do my money dance," and glorying in the accumulation and presumably just the keeping of wealth. Yeah, you know, Jesus spoke more about money than he did about prayer. 11 of his 40 parables, one scholar has counted them up, 11 of his 40 parables are about money. The parable of the rich man and Lazarus, the parable of the talents, the parable of the hidden treasure, that parable of the rich young man, rich young ruler, the parable of the pearl of great price, and now on and on and on. He understood that even though he had a very mixed audience, his audience was people that primarily were folk that needed more to exist. They were the poor of the earth, and he was trying to help them to understand that there are things that you need and that money helps us get, but if that's all you're after, then your life's not going to be very much. And of course, then that's not even to go into the tradition that informed him, the prophetic tradition of prophet after prophet after prophet saying, "Woe to you who are rich," again and again.
Okay, Rabbi, any thoughts?
Well, this is, I think, a very rich discussion. Been waiting all day to say that. In our tradition, money is not seen as an evil. It's seen as a tool to do good. There's no question in the sources, in the early sources, that when we think of what it means to be blessed, it means to have wealth. But the question is, what do you do with that wealth? And if you look in the book of Leviticus, if you want to create a holy society, it says you use that wealth to ensure that everyone is cared for. So in Leviticus 19, when you harvest a field, you're told you need to leave the edges and the gleanings on the ground for the poor and for the stranger, for the vulnerable in the community. Now, why can't I just harvest it all and put a box next to my house that says, "Poor, come and take"? Because it's not enough to just care. I have to care in a way that preserves dignity and humanity. There is no question that we need to look after ourselves and our own wherewithal. Hillel in the Talmud was famous for his phrase, "Im ein ani li mili," if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? But then the second thing he says, "Uchsha'ani la'atzmi ma'ani," but if I'm only for myself, what am I? And that's why the value of tzedakah, the value of charity, in Hebrew it really means justice and fairness, is so paramount in our culture, this idea that I have to share what I have with those who have less. And that it's my responsibility to ensure that I use my money in a way that is moral and is fair. The other thing that I also think about is that we all are tasked with conducting business. But we have to conduct our business affairs the right way so that the interchange of money is one that's done also on a moral high ground. There is a famous imagining that the rabbis do in the Talmud, where they imagine the 4 questions the Holy One is going to ask when you have your final appointment. And the first question they imagine that God will ask you is, did you conduct your business affairs with integrity? Because that's kind of where the rubber meets the road. Do you live your life trying to do the moral right thing with whatever you have? You know, to whom much is given, much is expected. And I think our tradition promotes that as a moral good.
Thank you.
These are all very excellent points. I think that's the point is that money is in a sense necessary. At least private ownership is necessary, though it's not absolute. The necessity of it is precisely that if we don't have it, if nobody owns anything, then nobody owns anything. And if everybody owns anything, nobody owns everything. You know, because and those who will lose out the most are the poor, and those who will go without. And then will be no access for anybody, or those just simply for the few. You know, the goods of production, material or immaterial, and people who are responsible for those goods, the first good should go to the poor, or at least be destined for those, and not hoarded. I think there's a problem morally, and I understand the economic reasons, but there's a moral system that needs to be offered for an assessment of this when we're wasting food for the sake of political leverage, or we're dispersing food precisely for power or control on a multinational level, and as well as on a national level. That too is a moral aspect that needs to be considered. One other thing is that if money has a disproportionate influence on us, then we only see the material aspects of the common good, not the immaterial aspects, which are by definition higher and more to be enjoyed by human beings. The immaterial aspects, things like art, things like music, philosophy, education. So many of these things are, the more you share these things, the more they grow, as opposed to material goods, which is the more you give them away or you share, they dissipate. So not everything can be commodified materially. And I think we lose sight of that in a culture that places an undue emphasis on material acquisition.
I think there's an interesting piece, though, in that article of what is the proper role for a house of worship when it comes to its own resources or compensating the leaders of those institutions. You know, I think that so much in our society we assume just happens without thinking about how it happens. You know, I remember somebody came to our congregation and they said, "Why do I have to pay to pray?" I said, "You don't have to pay to pray. You just have to pay to pray here. You have to pay to pray because we have to pay for the air conditioning and the electricity and the toilet paper and the book that you're holding and the seat that you're sitting in and the people that are leading you in worship. So if you want to pray at home, be my guest. But if you want to be part of this community, you have to share in the responsibilities for that community." But at the same time, I think I know leading a congregation, and I suspect those of you who also lead congregations recognize that there is a sacred trust in how you apply and how you use the contributions and the generosity of charitable gifts to maintain that institution, to do so in a way that is not lavish, to do so in a way that is prudent and is proper.
Yeah, and I like Shane Looper's word there that money is bossy because it has effect in that area of our concern as well, in our corporate work as congregations. It can boss us around. It can lead us around by the nose. It can keep us from doing the things that are faithful to our calling and keep us concerned. My congregation is in a building that was built in 1914. So we have this ancient building that could become our master. and we have to work hard at keeping it from being that way.
Thank you. And we're going to have to stop there and have a break. Thank you.
We hope you're enjoying today's program. If you'd like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the vision and history of the program, and we invite you to become a ministry partner, explore our Town Hall Estates healthcare facilities, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, we look forward to receiving your letters. You may write us at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. If you have a prayer request, please send it to prayerrequest@americanreligious.org. Thank you for writing and thank you for watching. Now, back to today's closing statements.
Welcome back, viewers. I hope you've been enjoying today's program. And please do remember, we really do want to hear from you. Please give us your ideas, your comments, thoughts about other programs that we might consider. And of course, if you have any prayers, please do send them. We would love to pray with you and for you. And now back to our closing comments.
Just political authority has the right and responsibility to regulate legitimate exercise of the right to ownership for the sake of the common good. And the development of economic activity and growth in production are meant to provide for the needs of human beings equitably, though not identically, all the time. And so economic life is not meant solely to multiply goods produced and increase simply for profit or power in itself. It is directed, first of all, to the service of persons, for all human beings, and for the entire human community.
Money is an opportunity. Now you may say, well, I just want more opportunity. Money is an opportunity, and the use of it is a reflection of our character. And that's the bottom line for people of faith, I think. At the heart of our faith is the claim that God created everything, and everything belongs to God, and ultimately is God's, and that our trust must be in God alone, and not in ourselves and the things that we can store up for ourselves, thinking that if we don't do it, God's not going to be there for us.
I had a professor in college, a theology professor, Robert Kolb, and I remember in his class he introduced ISM, identity, security, and meaning. He said, this is your God, right? Where you find identity, security, and meaning. I mean, when all the chips are down, what is it that you trust in? And I think that, our discussion today is about money is certainly instrumental for purposes to serve for the common good, to help the poor, to serve ourselves, to serve our neighbors. At the fundamental core, though, is the question about, is money where you find your identity, where you find your security, where you find your meaning? I say maybe perhaps we're addressing here then an idol, and we are, all of us, honestly, all of us struggle with it. I'm not going to lie that it's addictive. Money's fun. You can do a lot of things with it, and so I think it's something that I constantly be reminded to repent myself and to receive God's forgiveness through Christ, and again to work to serve my neighbor even better with the gifts that God's given me.
So I remember I had a friend who had an older brother who was into finance, and he had made himself a goal that he was going to be a millionaire by the time he was 30. And he achieved that goal. And I remember I said to him, so why did you want to get rich? And he said, because I want to give it all away. And he told this story that when he was a little boy, his dad was president of the synagogue. And it was Saturday morning, and during the service, the rabbi said to the congregation, I just want to let everybody know we spoke to a roofer, and we're going to need to replace the roof of the synagogue, and I don't know how we're going to pay for it, but we're going to probably have to find the money to do that. And he remembers he was standing next to his father and the rabbi after the service. And a man came up and put his arm around the rabbi and said, "Rabbi, the roof, it's taken care of." And they all looked at him. He says, "It's taken care of." And he said, from that moment on, I wanted to grow up to be that guy. I wanted to be the guy that could create great things and take care of a community and provide for those who couldn't provide for themselves. And I wanted to be able to be the person who could step up and say, "Rabbi, it's taken care of." And I think that, to me, I learned a lesson of that wealth isn't an evil. It's how you choose to use your wealth, how you choose to use the blessings that you are able to garner for yourself that determines the moral quality of what that wealth actually means for you and for our lives.
Thank you all. As I've been listening to you, I thought about the other story in the New Testament, which seems to me to counter the rich young ruler, and that's the woman, the woman who, with her mites, who goes into the temple, and Jesus is watching, and as she gives her gift, it's very little, but she says but she's given so much more than anyone else because she's given basically everything. And I don't think this is just a program for those of us who have lots of money. I think it's for everybody, because it's an attitude to what we have and how we relate to what we have to those around us. As a president of a university, one of the things I always dreaded doing when I came into this role was the fundraising piece, the going and asking for money. But yet I discovered very quickly that there are many people out there with money, with resources, who just want to give. They care about giving, often anonymously, because they really see, as we've talked about, they see their money as a blessing to them, and they want to give back to it. And so thank you, all of you out there that have that attitude of mind and are willing to make a difference with the resources and the gifts that God has given you and the blessings God has given you. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And so now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. And may the God of all of us bless all of you.